Hey, I'm Brent Lindstrom. Welcome to Like-Minded Arts. I am on a journey to go from Hammer to Hollywood, and along the way, I want to learn tools that will help all of us not just be struggling artists, but to also become creative. Working creatives. Sorry. I'm forgetting my own taglines here. So we want to become working artists instead of struggling artists or working creatives. Okay. You know what? I might re-record that later. I don't know. We'll see. We'll just go with the flow for now. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I've got with me today Ceylan Gunduz, and she is, she started out as a young writer and a self-published teen author with a passion for filmmaking. Jalon became a freelance editor in her adult years, where she met the community of creative entrepreneurs who eventually became One Brilliant Arc, a story studio startup publishing production company.
It is.
That's a big mouthful. And all right, and an empowerment movement for marginalized creatives that amplify their authentic voices and help them get their own stories out in the world. I want to touch on that. So now Jalon, it's spelled Ceylan, but it's pronounced
That would be
Jalon.
the Turkish language, courtesy of the Turkish language not having a J in its alphabet. So the C is pronounced as a J.
That is so interesting. I know absolutely nothing about Turkey other than it has nothing to do with
At least you
bird.
know that, because growing up, when I tell you the amount of bullying I got about everyone doing the whole gobble gobble joke, it got fast.
Oh, I can see that happen. That's unfortunate. Okay. Well, anyhow, moving on. Jalon now works as an editor-in-chief and content manager with the purpose of spreading the healing power of storytelling and helping voices that are too often silenced and help them find their impact. Okay, I may have butchered that a little bit, but
it is a mouthful. I will give you that. There is a lot that we're trying to do, because I think when you're working with story in general, it's a huge vision. And we're still trying to wrap our arms around it ourselves, but the biggest tenets are community and authenticity and the power of story.
So you talked in there too about marginalized stories. What do you mean about marginalized stories?
I think that there is this sense of, and I think it stems from commercialism, and it stems from social media, where we all got very comfortable having a polished image, but also the oppressive systems that are kind of just baked into our society. There's not a lot of room for raw humanity and for nuanced stories, how individual human voices want to tell them. For a lot of people, their lived experience is only acceptable to come across in a story if it sounds like a polished version of what is kind of put out as the acceptable version of the story. So I think that a lot of marginalized people, especially in American society, are forced into these different boxes where, unless they sound a certain way, then they're not going to be accepted by mainstream, because it's just too raw, it's too human, it's too nuanced, and it doesn't fit into that acceptable version of the story that people want to hear. So we're trying to help marginalized creatives who have felt this kind of pressure to shrink themselves into someone else's version of the story, find their own voice and be able to tell their version. Because there's a lot of people who have these lived experiences and these emotional truths that are so much more powerful for other people to connect to than for people to be connecting with stories that really just tell a lie, because that is what, performance polish is. It's a lie. It's just a mask that we wear.
That's interesting. It reminds me of a movie, an indie movie that I recently saw, where this guy basically comes and interviews some old gentleman from the Navajo Nation, and his story was told in his way, and it was really hard for him to get the story. He almost had to indoctrinate this guy in the culture for his story to actually be understood. And so what you're saying kind of reminds me of that a little bit. The whole aspect of telling a marginalized story and a story that's maybe not done in a way that might be polished or maybe commercialized, As an editor, how do you feel that aligns with story
That is
structure?
that is very that's a huge topic to unpack, definitely. I think I struggled a really long time, and it's something that I still wrestle with, about having to hold in both hands both marketability and authenticity. And I think story structure actually gives a really great framework to put your authenticity into. Because all story structure is it's the proven pattern of story beats that has been proven over all of these generations and millennia to resonate with people the best. So when you use story structure, you bring your authenticity, you bring your own voice, you bring your own emotional truth and your worldview to it. And that's going to be unique to every person, because we all have different lived experiences. We all have such a vast patchwork of different stories that influence us and turn us into the person, the human that we are. So I think that when you put your own voice into story structure, that's really the key to being able to make your art both marketable, both resonate with people in the proven pattern that has been shown to be effective, but also authentic, because you're putting your own voice into that. And your voice is something that no one else can copy, as long as you are tapping into that very human, raw part of you, and you're not just putting on a mask and trying to sound like the next person
Okay,
that
that's interesting. So,
you want to be as successful as.
does that mean where you're kind of trying to help a lot of these marginalized stories and things? Does that lean you towards fiction versus nonfiction kind of stories more than
I
another,
definitely
or?
love fiction stories as a personal preference. I think that fiction has a very unique ability to kind of get into our souls in a way. And I always like to say fiction is more true than reality in some cases. I think it holds truth better than reality in a lot of ways. So I love the quotes by authors that kind of unpack this really magical truth about fiction, especially G.K. Chesterton, I believe, and then Neil Gaiman repeated it, but we won't talk about that.
I like Neil Gaiman. I don't know the other, but I do know
He
Neil Gaiman.
does
I
have
like
some
his stuff.
very insightful words for authors. But G.K. Chesterton said that fantasy doesn't teach children that dragons are real, because children already know dragons are real. It teaches them that dragons can be beaten. And that's the kind of truth that I love to see come out in the fiction stories that I work with. I do also work with nonfiction writers, and I think that storytelling structure still very much applies to the nonfiction stories that we tell. But I personally just love the playground of fiction, and I love the unique power and beauty that it holds.
That's cool. Cool. All right. Well, speaking of stories, I want to get into your story a little bit. Where did your storytelling journey begin? Because as I understand it, you have actually written your own books before, or your own stories. So tell us a little bit, what got
I
you
would
into
definitely
story?
say it started as a very young child. Before I could even read, I was memorizing books so that I could read them to myself. I think I put together
You were memorizing
I
them.
think I
Wow.
was putting together like my first, glue stick and illustrate and, sketching illustrated book when I was maybe 6 or 7. But I always just loved communicating through writing. I loved stories. I loved filmmaking. It fascinated me. I kind of dabbled in that a little bit. And being homeschooled, I just had the freedom to pursue all these different interests. And really dive into like gaining the skills and the knowledge, kind of just going down all these different rabbit trails. So I very quickly just really grew attached to fiction writing, and story that I wrote. It's very much a cringy story for me to look back on, just because I've grown so much since then. But it was still something that I'm
Well,
proud that I was able to do. And even if it doesn't represent me now and the skills now that I have, it's still fascinating to look back on. There's still so much at the core of the structure that had become innate to me from all of the reading that I had done. So I was largely self-taught just through reading and gaining my own understanding through other people's experience and tapping into the creative community that was available to me. I started then beta reading for other author friends, and that led to a fascination with editing. So in my adult years, I became a freelance editor, and that was a great way for me, even as I was going through some creative burnout because of the path that my personal life took. I was still able to kind of get my storytelling fix by partnering with people in their creativity and helping them tell a story in the best way that they could.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it sounds to me like you've, especially that homeschooling aspect of it, having that freedom to explore kind of these things that you felt really passionate about. And I think there's a lot of people who are more in a structured system that don't quite get that freedom to explore their interests like you did. That's
Definitely.
really incredible, I think.
I am so grateful for my parents for making that decision and for giving me that opportunity. But it also plays into my experience of, I know what it's like I know very intimately the experience of growing up without that external pressure to force yourself into a box, and then with that external pressure from society that you have to put yourself into a box that's been predetermined for you and been already predetermined by society as acceptable, and the kind of stifling that causes to creativity.
So did you have any like creative obstacles in your way when you was trying to pursue some of this creativity, or was it just second nature to pursue all that?
It was definitely second nature. When I was young, I'm firstborn, and I definitely had a very visionary mindset. Nothing was impossible, and I had to grow up and face reality of there are limitations. Sometimes the journey doesn't happen as quickly as you'd like. It takes a lot more hard work than I think anyone is initially prepared for, but I think that's the beauty of it, because the more hard work you put in, the more you can really dig down to what your core purpose and passion is. And I think that's where you get at those human truths that really matter and really make these stories that we tell timeless and impactful for people.
I get what you're saying. I mean, when I look at my own journey too, I look at the time it takes to actually get to where you want to be. I mean, I've mentioned a lot of times on my YouTube channel about how it's so hard to just jump right into some kind of creative endeavor. Like, the arts are notorious for creating struggling artists, and to make that leap into being a working creative, or just to get your story told and eyeballs in it when there's so many things drawing our attention away, it can be hard, and it doesn't happen overnight.
I appreciate that we kind of met at, it almost seems a very similar place along our journey. I mean, how many years have you been trying to get some momentum behind your artistic career?
Boy, I remember making short films when I was a kid. And terrible films, by the way. Snow Pink and the One Dwarf, starring my brother and sister. And I didn't dare kiss my sister, who was Snow Pink, because she was my sister. So no, but then being told that don't go down that road. It's not the road for you. And then getting into writing again took me till I was out of college and rekindling that passion. But at that point, having a family to support and knowing that I can't just dive into this, you gotta be responsible at the same time. And maybe it was easier path before when there were more barriers to entry, but boy, making a career out of art is not an easy thing these days right now.
It's very true. There's so much noise in our world nowadays. I think that it takes a lifetime, it almost seems, to rise above that noise and find your people. Because it's easy enough if you play the game and you kind of sell out and just say what people want to hear. But if you're telling authentic, true stories, it takes a while for them to find your people and just to get eyeballs, like you said, on your work. But then when you do find those people, you realize that you've created a timeless story, because it's not just following whatever trends are there. It's a story that's going to endure because it's based in these human truths that are always going to be true. So I definitely am so grateful to meet another artist who understands the amount of time and effort it takes, and has, I mean, a lot of those struggles are so relatable, but they're not talked about enough.
Where you're from, do they have the oral storytelling festivals?
If they do, I've sadly not had the opportunity to go to one. I do know, so right now, where we are, for the past couple of years, we've been in North Carolina, and I know that a few hours away, there is Cherokee, North Carolina, and they have a yearly festival where they kind of invite people outside of their nation to come in and hear their stories and hear the plays that they put on with their oral tradition. So I've always wanted to go to that, but I haven't had a chance to.
It's so amazing, because what you're talking about, these non-traditional stories too, it reminded me of. So I'm from Utah here, and we have this thing called the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, and they draw from everywhere, the Bible Belt, all over the country, and I think they even get some international speakers to these too, but rather than focusing on the written word or like a visual format, this is all in-person storytelling. And I've been to a couple of those, and you do get a lot of those marginalized stories, which is so incredible to me. Like, I remember going to this one once, and it was this lady who was put in the Japanese internment camps for back during World War II. And listening to her story about her family growing up during that time, like, it would have never been a story that I would have just picked up and read or found anywhere else. And yet to sit down and listen to her tell her story in her way, it was just one of the most amazing, uplifting things that I had experienced. And it's really fun to go to these oral storytelling festivals because they do a lot of things like that. And so, yeah, just to your point, if you find things like that around, these oral storytelling events are so much fun, and it sounds like they're right up your alley on this kind of stuff.
That is so fascinating to hear. Very, very special that is still preserved even in our culture of they say fast fashion being a thing. I think of it as fast entertainment being a thing. I'm so uplifted to hear that these oral traditions and these personal storytelling events are still promoted in our culture.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I mean I'm a big fan of story in any genre. I tend to lean towards the cleaner fiction side of things personally and in my professional work, but yeah, it's I think there's a lot of stories that, like for music, I don't know what kind of music you listen to, but I like to listen to a whole variety of genres. And if you just stick to one, you close yourself off to just a huge world of amazing story. So if your journey, let's just assume for a minute that your journey was a traditional 3-act structure style of a journey in your creative work or in your professional life here, where would you say that you lie in that outline or in that?
That's such a fun question, and it's funny too because I've asked a lot of people this question in the workshops that we've been putting on with One Brilliant Arc, just walking people through their life story and applying story structure there to help them understand it. But to answer it myself, I've never really had that opportunity. But I would say that I'm somewhere in the second act where I'm past the point of no return. There's been a call to action, and I refused it at first, but now I'm definitely being shoved into it. The catalyst has happened, and I'm going through all of the different challenges and tests to see if I'm going to persevere to get to that third act.
And so you've mentioned before that you had a little creative burnout and that you do a lot of editing too. So does your journey still include any writing, or has your focus completely shifted towards helping
At this
others on
point,
their
my focus
journey?
has completely shifted to helping others on their journey. I do still get to exercise that creative muscle as a developmental editor, because there's a lot of times where I almost feel like I'm a co-creator of a story with some of my clients, because we just go so deep into the weeds of, but what if this happened? What if this happened? And being able to collaborate with our creativity is really, really fun. And sometimes I surprise myself at still having that creative muscle when I haven't used it personally for so long. But it's so purposeful for me and such a gift to be able to help other people. I'm completely fulfilled in that. And so far, I haven't had a story idea come knocking at my door and just kind of grab me by the throat and demand that I write it yet, because that was my experience with my debut novella. It was definitely one of those, like, the story just came to me and said, I have to be written, and it just happened. So that I haven't had an experience like that yet, but if I ever do, I will answer that call to action as well.
Okay. Well, in your editing journey, then, as you're kind of going along, do you feel like you've got the steps laid out for you? Because here, I want to be letting our audience, because a lot of our audience, I hope, is going to be the sort of person who is a creative who wants to know how they can actually make a career out of this, because a lot of us end up in dead-end jobs, or they end up in kind of a situation where they don't know how their passion and their art is going to support their how important to you is it to have a plan going forward, to know how you're going to achieve that versus think about it as if you were writing a story. You've got people who are outliners and you've got people who are pantsers, basically
Yep.
writing by the seat of their pants, like Stephen King or someone else. Like, how do you relate your journey so far to finding the financial stability that you need to pursue your dreams?
That's another. I'm glad that you brought that up again, because that was part of your story that you were sharing that I very much relate to, and that responsibility that you have is very heavy, because it's an equal responsibility to this lifestyle of a creative, of a storyteller, because it is a lifestyle. It really just takes over your entire being, but also having to provide, food for the table, food for your family, roof over your head. So I've always, creative work has always been my second job. I've always had a day job, and creative work it's a challenge that you have to figure out how to juggle that. The dream is obviously to one day get to that place where creative work and the work that fulfills my soul can be my only job. But that day is not yet. And yes, having a plan and having an outline is really important, especially when it comes to just knowing your story structure and knowing what that pattern is that resonates with people. But I think it's also, personally, when I write, I'm somewhere between an outliner and a pantser, because I think that there is something to say for leaving that space in your life for your creative intuition and your subconscious to have that freedom to show you something that maybe you didn't know otherwise. I've talked to so many people, so many writers who have shared the experience of, my story knew how it needed to be written. I needed to get out of my own way because I had these preconceived notions of how it needed to go. But when I put those aside and got out of my own way and just let it flow, then I was able to create something that was so much more powerful. And I think that it's the same in life. Sometimes, I believe in God. I believe that there is a divine being, and that as storytellers, we're connected to that divine being in a unique way, because it's part of that power of creation that comes from the creator. So I also think that it's important to have a plan in your life, but it's also important to be willing to be flexible and surrender to a greater plan that you may not even be aware that you're a part of.
I like that. It reminded me of a book I read not too long ago when I was doing some acting classes called The Creative Artist. And yeah, it does mention that higher power being a creative being. And if we're made in his image, doesn't that also enable us to be creators? And
I love
just
that.
a
I love
side
how
comment
many
there, but
stories that you're seeped in that are coming out in this conversation. I love that.
so maybe to shift gears a little bit. So we know a little bit about you. What's your background? Is there anything that else you want to add on to that before we go into
I think
some
we covered
discussion
it pretty
topics?
well.
Okay, good. Good. So my first topic that I want to go over with you is AI, because this is the buzzword.
Yep.
Everyone's talking about it. I'm sure that as an editor, you have probably come across some AI, I don't know what you would call it, just
Yeah.
slush,
Yeah.
or I don't know, but yeah. So in the neighborhood of AI and how it's going to affect authors and editors and all of that, what is your perspective
That's a
on
hard
this?
one because it's a big topic. It is a buzzword, and I know that it's a very polarizing topic because humans are really, I've realized this in my life, humans are really bad about balance and about nuance. So it's hard for them to hold two truths at the same time and be able to walk that fine line of balance without going too far into either ditch. So on the
You can see that in politics all the time.
on the one hand, you have the truth of, AI is taking away the value of artists because now it's a commodity that anyone can create something, can create content. That content may not be good. It may not be original. It won't be original. And it won't be authentic. So it's not going to connect in the way that a timeless story written from a human perspective will. But you can create content really, really fast that checks these boxes and fits into these acceptable stories that society wants to see, at least at this moment. And on the other ditch, you have, so that's like embracing AI. And on the other ditch, you have writers who are completely against it because it does all these things to the craft and it devalues it in that way. And so they're just refusing to embrace it entirely. And now they're not keeping up with the times. And as the tools are evolving, they're not learning how to use those tools to still keep their work relevant and effective in the new world that those tools are shaping for us. So it's a hard balance to walk. I've met some amazing people who are doing pioneer work, really, in my opinion, for teaching us how to use AI ethically. Because I think that's the problem with technology. Personally, I'm someone who is not a huge fan of technology because I think humans are just too irresponsible to use it, and so it scares me in that sense. But I do think that technology evolves faster than humans can learn how to handle it in an ethical way. And I think that's where we're at with AI right now. It's kind of like social media where like it came to be a thing so fast and it was available for everyone to use. And people just went haywire and they didn't realize the damage that it caused until it was too late. So I hope that I don't have too much hope that we can avoid that happening with AI, sadly, but I would hope that a lot of artists who listen to this show will have that responsible view of, you can use AI as a tool to help you in your work, but the story has to come from a human place if you want it to have that kind of authentic, timeless impact. Because there is a difference between art and content, and we live in an age where, artists are seen as content creators and they have to play the role of content creators because that's the business strategy of entrepreneurs nowadays. So trying to hold those two truths at the same time of we are both an artist and our stories are not a commodity, but we are also content creators in order to run our businesses and to get us to the place of having that financial stability from our art. So that it's a tricky question, and I defer to people who have studied the topic better to help us through the nuanced details of it. But I know that the power of story is very opposite of the ethos, the concept of AI. So
I think that's real interesting what you're saying there, because like I use AI a lot in my content creation, and you're balancing your creative side with your content side, and like I even in my content side, I don't want the AI to take over, but I've been experimenting so much in the last year with all sorts of AI, and I probably got 20 or more AI subscriptions, figuring out where the tool fits, because even though there's so many things and there's so much hype in it, it still lacks a soul. You can make it sound like somebody, or you can make it even sound like yourself. You can train it to sound like your voice, but when you actually read it, it's really clear that it's not. And you've got all these people saying it's going to get there, it's going to get there. But I'm not really sure that I buy into all the hype. But like, I had my dad actually come talk to me not too long ago, and he's like, "Hey, Brent, I wanna actually write my story." And he's never written anything in his life. He's a great businessman. He's got a lot of unique stories to tell, but he didn't really. He's not confident in his ability to write all that much. And so he was asking me, is there any AI software I should be looking at? And so I made some recommendations to him, but I said, listen, here's the thing. From my experience so far, you are the creator. You are the voice. You still need to focus on your story. You need to write it. The AI is only there to help with your deficiencies. Don't assume that it's going to write your story for you, or that it's going to completely snap your story into perfection once you do have it there. It's a tool that helps us develop faster and move along that line quicker. But, I'm like you. I don't see AI taking the artist out of the art. Even though at first that's what I was terrified about. It's like, well, why is it doing my art instead of my dishes? I'd rather have it be the other way around.
It's so funny because through this evolution of AI, I feel like authenticity has almost become a buzzword now, because we gained a new appreciation after AI slop just took over the internet. We gained a new appreciation for why we need humans behind stories, and why we just crave that authentic human perspective. Not polished, not filtered through any kind of plastic mask or machine that's soulless. We really just crave being seen in our authentic humanity and connecting with others in that authentic humanity. And like you said, with AI being a tool and not just you being the actual creator, I think it's really interesting because myself included, most writers that I know are they're self-deprecating, and they self-doubt a lot, and they don't have that confidence because they have so much introspection in their soul that's part of their gifting, but it also kind of comes and they shoot themselves in their foot because they don't have that confidence to stand in their voice. A lot of writers are struggling to find their voice, and I think that if you start using AI without knowing your voice and having that confidence in it, then it's very easy to defer to AI, because we're all trained. Again, going back to the majority of people who are raised in public school, they're trained that we need to sound like someone more professional. We need to follow the rules. We need to sound like someone more credible. We can't just sound like ourselves, because we don't have any credibility. We don't sound like a professional, so no one's going to want to listen to us. And that kind of just cripples an artist immediately from the get-go, and they stop trusting their authentic voice, and they stop trusting their subconscious that can direct them to really tell these powerful stories from their soul. And having AI as something that you can defer to, that can just easily give you that professional voice that you're trying to find, is it's a tempting trap to fall into, because we're all looking for that. We all have that little voice of self-doubt in our heads that says your voice isn't good enough. You as yourself is not good enough. You have to sound like somebody else. And AI just gives us that so easily. So I think artists especially have a tricky balance to walk when it comes to AI, where they have to know their own voice so well and know their humanity so well that AI won't corrupt it.
Yeah, and you also spoke to the AI slop that's out there, and that's one of the things that worries me, is because maybe AI slop doesn't resonate with people, but it still does pull eyeballs away from the good quality content that we as artists are trying to make. And I think that's the scariest part for me, is that diluting of the attention span, or not necessarily the attention span, but diluting the eyeballs that can actually find the good quality art. Because you know that there's going to be people who are going to watch the AI slop. They're going to watch it and be like, oh, that's funny. And, there's going to be creative stuff out there that's put out by content producers, and it is going to draw eyeballs. So, getting noticed, that seems like a really trick. The actual trick to most creatives now.
For sure. And it's also I was just listening to a podcast today where the discussion of, as soon as you start making money as an artist, then you start being called a sellout, because it's like the money almost corrupts the purity of the art. But on the other hand, you have, this short attention span that TikTok has given all of us, and you have that business model that we have to follow of being content creators. But you have to hold that intention with understanding that a lot of artists who are now recognized as great artists were not great in their time. They were great after they had already died. People found their work after they had already died.
I hope I'm not one of those.
It makes you wonder, though. Like, we all want our art to be our career now, because that's the passion, that's the dream. But what if there's a bigger purpose to what to the stories that we're telling and the art that we're creating? What if that purpose is really just a service to humanity that we're going to leave behind us as a legacy? And if you have that perspective, if that is success in your mind, then it doesn't so much matter if you win that attention that you need to take your career off within your lifetime or not. Or if it just takes way more time than you ever wanted it to take, then that act of being patient as those eyeballs start slowly filtering in is worth it to you, because you have a reason why you keep going, even against all odds, and even when the numbers are super discouraging.
That's an interesting perspective, because I hadn't thought about that before. I made a video once it was just for me and my family. I went and interviewed my grandparents on camera, so that when they were gone, we could actually look back and get a glimpse into what their life was like. I think I did like an hour or two interview with them, and I learned things doing that I wouldn't have learned before. But we didn't make that to be commercial. We made that so that down the road, after they're gone, it would create some value. And where you were saying that maybe some of the art that we create now has maybe a higher purpose that maybe we don't understand yet, or a message for people to follow that is really going to help future generations. I think that's a really important point to make that I've never really considered, because it hits me in a different way, because we're trying to help artists become successful, but you're saying that sometimes that success isn't what matters the most. So, what can you speak to maybe maintaining profitability versus maintaining that, I don't know if you would call it not passion, maybe passion, or in your case,
that
maybe
greater
purpose.
That's a hard question. I'm going to be honest. I'm still struggling with it, because I don't think there's anything wrong with artists learning how to be profitable and being profitable from their work and making that their career. It makes me so excited to cheer on artists who have genuinely meaningful stories to tell and see them find their audience and be able to make a career off of telling those meaningful stories and creating that art. But there's so many people who go into it and have good stories to tell and create great art, but they don't make a successful career. And in those cases, I think that it is important to reframe what success means to you, because sometimes success isn't necessarily going to be profitability. Sometimes it's going to be something even more meaningful than that. Sometimes our art is a labor of love for, like you did, for yourself and for future generations to be able to look back on, and it's going to give them something priceless. Family stories mean so much to me, especially with my heritage, and that's something that, interviewing grandparents is, and just recording their stories to make sure that they never get lost to obscurity is something so beautiful and so impactful to me. That is something where I'm glad that technology has evolved to that point where we can record those things. But yeah, that's a really hard tension to hold, and I haven't figured it out myself. If anyone has, I would love to hear from you. But I do know that for me, especially just to keep myself going and reaching for that profitability and not giving up right away when the numbers don't climb as fast as I wanted them to, even if I'm doing everything right in order to win those audience members and win those sales. I think that it's important to reframe what success really means to you, because again, sometimes it takes a lot longer than we want it to, because we all have short attention spans and we all want instant gratification. But I think meaningful things take a long time to build, and I think what's going to keep you showing up, even when all of the odds seem stacked against you, is going to be that greater purpose that you're working for, that why that you have for why you started. And it has to be something that's in your control and not something that's outside of your control, such as profitability.
I like that, and it hits on one of the points that I like to make a lot, is that, if you have a story that you need to tell, then, and if it's going to not be profitable, at least not now, or maybe in the near future, you almost need to find a way to take care of what also matters most in the now. So finding some, as an artist myself, I don't feel like you have to only be an artist or only be a responsible financial citizen. I think that there's room for both to coexist, which is why I am very strong about investing and business ownership and finding ways that help you be a responsible person so that you're not completely relying on others so you can do your art. I know there's artists who have done that. They basically take grants and they take donations from others so they can focus on their art regardless of whether or not it's ever successful. But I personally feel that, there's probably room for both to coexist. And if you know that your stories aren't likely to be successful, find a way that you can still take care of your family.
For sure. And I mean, there's a ton of business gurus nowadays that will promise artists that they're going to be profitable in, do follow this one trick and you'll go from 0 to 10,000.
Structure a Facebook ad like me.
Exactly. And there's all of these catchy promises that we all fall for, because we need that. We need to pay the bills. We need to eat every day. And so it's hard to, again, maintain your voice without selling out in order to fit into these boxes that are trending at the time in order to have that instant gratification of profitability. But I think that it is also important to know that there are going to come moments in your creative career where you have to face that tough decision of, do I follow this trend and pursue marketability in this way, even if it's not exactly the story that I wanted to tell or how I wanted to tell it, just so that I can make some money and get some eyeballs on my work? Or am I going to choose to tell my story exactly the way that I want to tell it and not care about what the market thinks of it? And I think that it's important to, before you get to those points, write down what you're not willing to compromise on when it comes to your authentic voice and how you're going to tell your story. Because sometimes we do have to make compromises in order to fit in with the current market, because again, that's something that we don't have control over. We have to kind of defer to the way that the economy is going. But it is important to still have those things that you're not going to compromise on. You've already decided, like, this is part of my authentic voice, and if I compromise on it, it's not me anymore.
Cool. So just a couple questions for you. I don't want to draw this out too long, and we've touched on some of these, but maybe just as some bullet point answers to these, what would you say that one of the lessons is that has meant the most to you as you've been going through this whole journey?
Definitely perseverance. Yeah, I mean, everything that we've talked about so far, it takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes your entire soul, and being able to have a why that keeps you persevering through all of the obstacles is really important.
Would you say that that's the hardest part about being an artist, or would you say that there's still something else that maybe is a little harder for being an artist?
Personally, for me, that would be my answer to what's the hardest thing about being an artist, is the amount of soul work that it takes and the amount of discouragement that you have to face. But I know that answer is going to be different for every artist, because we're all individuals and we all have different perspectives on what's most challenging.
Well, let's flip that on the side. What would be the most rewarding part for you as an artist?
Definitely that connection to stories that have an impact, that really change hearts. In my life, I've experienced story being the one thing that can save me from my darkest moments and keep me going, to be that light at the end of the tunnel, be that moment of escape into a beautiful reality when the reality around me is really ugly, and keeps me hoping for better days. And in so many ways, story has been what has saved me. And I know that in all of history, story is very much what has changed the world and what has saved people and changed hearts to create a better reality in our physical world. So I think that would be the most rewarding thing, is just being able to connect with people on that soul level and share stories that really do touch your heart and touch your soul.
So you offer a lot of great advice, and I'm learning from you a lot right here. But and as an editor, I mean, you're always teaching people, you're always helping them, especially as it comes to their stories. I guess the question I would have for you is, as you're helping other people, you come across stories of all sorts, I'm sure. Is there anything that you're working on with people right now that you're able to share with us that is just really getting you excited?
Well, I know for a fact that I can share the work that we're doing with One Brilliant Arc. Right now, I mentioned a little bit the workshop that we're doing. It's called Tell It Anyway. It's an 8-week-long program that we have, small cohorts of 8 to 12 who sign up to commit to 8 weeks of unpacking their story and finding their authentic voice, and then turning that into something that they can bring to their marketing strategy. It's all about narrative ownership. That's the core tenet. And it's just been so beautiful and so exciting to see all of the great things that are coming out of that workshop, and seeing all of these individual stories being discovered because they're able to name their experiences with the help of story structure for the first time ever. And they're also seeing a clear path forward to creating and building the stories in our world that they want to, that they've always dreamed of. So all of those people who are in our pilot program, their stories and the stories that they're planning on creating have been the most exciting to me recently.
So if someone's just starting out and they want to become an artist, they want to become a writer or anything like this, do you have 2 pieces of advice that you would just give them flat out and say, whatever else, remember these 2 things? It would definitely be
find your why. This is the very first thing. Find that purpose that's going to keep you going, even if you don't have any profitability from your work. And also find your voice and be strong in your identity as your authentic self, because there's going to be so many forces that are going to try to steal your voice and corrupt yourself and make you wear that mask as you show up in the world as a storyteller. And I think that it's the first thing you need to learn when you're writing is to find your own voice and stay true to it. But it's also something that you have to hold on to for the entirety of your journey as an artist.
All right, so we're going to wrap things up here pretty quick, but I just got a few rapid-fire questions. You don't need to elaborate, just so that we get a good idea for you and things. What is your favorite
My favorite fiction novel would be... There's a lot, but I would say if I had to choose, it would be the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson.
How about nonfiction?
Oh, okay. I read Victoria Arlen's memoir, Locked In. That one hit me hard, made me cry. And it's probably the most powerful nonfiction story I've ever read. So Victoria Arlen, she is a newscaster and a Paralympian. And her story was that she just slipped into a vegetative state when she was a teenager and kind of lived in this coma for so many years and then suddenly woke up one day. And it was her journey of being locked in her body and then learning how to gain back everything that she had lost through that experience.
All right. What about your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie?
Newsies.
Oh, I love the Newsies. I so badly want to write a musical.
We need more musicals in our world.
And I don't know how to do
music.
We really do. We do. All right. If you could have lunch with any actor, actress, writer, or famous person,
I think it would have to be Zendaya. She is the queen. We all bow down to her.
All right. What about your go-to karaoke song? If you just need to just burst out singing, what's it gonna be?
To save my life. Karaoke actually sounds like my worst nightmare.
That's what my wife says about
But I will say the songs that I will sing, no matter how bad I sound in public, would be VeggieTales songs or Newsies songs.
I love VeggieTales songs. I love Newsies. You can't go wrong with either of those. I sing the "What We Have Learned Applies to Our Lives." I sing that every Sunday night when I gather all the kids around. Like, all right, kids, what'd you learn in Sunday school?
I love that. I'm so excited to meet someone who appreciates these niche things like I do.
Oh, they're awesome. Wish they were still putting out some awesome stuff. I haven't seen anything new from them in a long time, though. If there was a quote, what is a quote that you wish you had written?
Kate Rakowski. Nothing ever ends poetically. It ends and we turn it into poetry. All that blood was never once beautiful. It was just red.
All right. I'd have to think about that one for a minute.
It really is. It's beautiful to me because it encapsulates the power of story to reframe all of our pain in the human experience to be something beautiful that has a purpose beyond just the senseless pain that we had to live through because this world is broken. And so I think that that's what that quote embodies to me, is the reason why story saves people and the reason why it's so important and so necessary in our broken world. But it's also just beautiful poetry that I wish I could have written.
That hits home. I've been thinking about the phrase that everything is more and less than it seems. And, I don't know.
Yeah.
Still doing thinking on that one. But, thanks for sharing that. So before we end, I want to give you an opportunity to share with everybody exactly how they can find you and what it is that you're doing that can help them, just so help them know how to get in touch with you if they need any of your services, and help them understand what those services are.
www.obaconnect.com, obaconnect.com. That is our website. You can get in touch with everyone who works at One Brilliant Arc there individually, or you can message the company. I do hide behind the company messages, so that is how you can get in contact with me. But we offer editing services, publishing consulting, script doctoring, story coaching, really. our model is writing coaching, because we want to meet writers wherever they are in their journey and help them tell the story that they need to hear first, and then that the world needs to hear, and help them get it out into the world. So we have free consults available so that you can just get to know us, get to know how we can help you. And if you're stuck in your story, we offer free story audits to just get you started, get you broken free from whatever is keeping you stuck right now with your work in progress. But yeah, we always love to grow our community. We have free education there with different podcasts and discussions with other writers and artists, and articles on our website. So we'd love to have you check it out. And thank you. Thank you very much for having me here and sharing this opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining me, Jalon. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I look forward to continuing a relationship with you and all those that work at One Brilliant Art. I think that what you guys are doing is incredible, and boy, I just have so much respect for you guys.
Likewise. Likewise.
Well, I hope that I can live up to some of the expectation too, but, you know, as creators, we're all on a journey together, and sometimes it takes a community to build up not only our confidence, but our skills, and I think you guys are out there doing a great service for others.
1,000%. You're so right. It is the community and breaking down those barriers that, you know, everything has been gatekept in the past, and we're breaking down those barriers to make sure that everyone knows this is a journey that we're all in together.
Well, thank you again, Jalon, and just as a reminder to those out there, please like, subscribe, check Jalon and the crew out over at One Brilliant Art, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.